With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao, a new kind of flavored sparkling water. The kind made with real fruit juice, a pinch of Sicilian salt, and the sparkle of the Italian sun. With no added sugar and just 10 or less calories per can, enjoy. With love, from Italy. By San Pellegrino Ciao now.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hey there, Duke fans. Episode number 113 of DBR Bites is here. We are recording this seconds after recording 112, but this is probably in your feeds about a half a day later. We haven't decided yet, but when you listen to this voice, you will have heard episode 112 where we had said we had a bunch of news things that we want to comment on. We split it into two just so we could get proper discussion and make sure that this Bites is as long as a regular episode as we tend to do. I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I got Jason Evans still with me. Jason, I mean, let's start. Like, where are we excited about to talk about? Because there's, we're still 3 things left on the menu to discuss. Yeah. So in episode 112, and if you haven't listened, it's possible, depending on how your feed works, that you may get this one and not even realize that you skipped 112. Go back and stop what you're doing right now. Go back and listen to 112 first, because I talk about recruiting. I talk about some specific guys who could be headed to Duke. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is a story that actually impacts recruiting and has impacted why I think you haven't yet seen any guys committing to Duke thus far in the summer recruiting season. Yeah, so let's get into it. And Jason, when the House settlement came down in the courts, you and I discussed it at length and what it meant for college basketball. Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about was this clearinghouse that had been established by the NCAA to kind of scrutinize and review all of these different NIL deals, these sponsorship deals, and make sure that they were above board. And this clearinghouse committee was going to be responsible for approving or denying all of these different NIL deals that were coming from everyone around the country. Thousands. It's run by Deloitte. Yeah. Deloitte is the one handling it. They sort of an independent, have no stake in it kind of accounting firm who's handling all these. They're basically making sure that any NIL deal that comes across their desk, that it is legitimate, not inflated for pay for play. That there's supposedly supposed to be legitimate business reasons behind paying a player, and any contract above $600 must be approved before it is signed by the player. And when it all first got established, they mentioned that in theory of the current NIL deals that were currently out there, they mentioned that about 90 to 95% of them would have been approved if this clearinghouse was established a year prior. Now, Jason, you and I opined back then that we were not done with the house settlement. And boy, we were right. Because over the course of the last, couple of months, this new clearinghouse that has been in effect, what a lot of these teams have learned is that Deloitte is not just approving everything willy-nilly. They are really scrutinizing these deals, and were not approving as many as people thought. So, of course, my profession, I'm an attorney. A bunch of attorneys got together, and they got together with. Go ahead.
I was going to say the real thing that was happening was they did not consider NIL collectives, these groups of individuals who are functioning essentially as pay for play for schools. They did not consider any collective to be a legitimate business interest. As far as they were concerned, the collectives existed only to pay the players. By the way, they're right about that for the most part. But they said this is not a true endorsement deal or appearance fee or something like that, because their only business interest is in paying players. This is not like Nike going ahead and signing a player, or like, Cooper Flagg signing with Under Armour and things like that. Or was it New Balance? Gosh, I can't even remember. New Balance. Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize, Cooper. They said these were not legitimate business entities, and so they were nixing every single deal from a collective. Boy, was that a problem.
Well, you stole the words out of my mouth, because that's what we were getting at. But at the same time, right, the attorneys for all these power conferences, and not just the teams, the conferences were involved. They went back to the NCAA, they went back to this settlement, and they said, hey, we got to figure out a way to make it where this is a little bit more defined, and also clear the way to make it where a lot of these deals are going through. Now, I will say this. The other thing, Jason, involved with that was that it created a backlog of all of these deals. And a lot of players were saying, hey, I'm going to go to this school, but if this deal doesn't go through, then I'm not going to stay at this school. So there was a lot of that going along. And so they finally reached a deal where with the power conferences, the NCAA, they have amended the decision-making process from this college sports commission, which, as you mentioned, was started and run by Deloitte. So now that these NIL collectives are now above board, so to speak, and now some of these deals that NIL collectives have struck with some of these players and the players' agents and such, those are going to go through a lot quicker than they were before. Those are the ones that were, again, creating this backlog because of the excess scrutiny that they were being subjected to. Now that is, for all intents and purposes, gone. And so now what that means is that a lot of these deals will be able to go through, and NIL collectives are once again back in the driver's seat at a lot of these power conferences with regards to the NIL deals that they can propose to incoming recruits. So, Jason, your thoughts on that, and just, again, the overall, once again, changing environment that is name, image, and likeness.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is this: I think the NCAA, the schools, really thought that the house settlement was going to function to some extent like a salary cap for the programs. And by programs, I don't mean just the basketball team or just the football, but the entire athletic department. That, there was this number, 20.5, 21, 22 million, something like that. That was the most that a school could spend to pay their players in every different sport. And I think the schools sort of thought, oh, this is going to be all the money. And the players' agents from the house settlement were like, no, we represent guys who want more money than that. And by getting this change with the folks who approve the NIL deals, functionally now you're going to have the schools paying the players and the collectives paying the players. And it is going to be way, way more than the 20.5, the $21 million that folks originally envisioned. And it's worth noting that most schools, and Duke is not different. Duke's probably putting 12, 15 million of that towards football, and then, most of the rest towards men's basketball. And that's the case at all the schools that have a big time football program and a big time basketball program. But now you're going to have the collectives chiming in as well. The reason I say all this, I want to get back to recruiting. The reason I say all this relates to recruiting is that, Donald, you have not seen very many of the top 50 or so, the 5-star, top 25, the 5-star players. You haven't seen very many at all of them from the class of 2026 committing to schools yet. And I think a lot of the reason, I know, a lot of the reason is that there is a tremendously uncertain climate right now in terms of the finances of college basketball. If you are one of these top players, your school, the coaches who are recruiting you, the collectives who are talking to you on behalf of those coaches and such, they're all probably saying, we're not certain exactly what kind of money we can get for you right now. Look, I think I've got a certain amount that I'm going to have from the school, but I don't know how much the collective is going to be able to funnel your way, because we're all figuring out this new system that's in place. And I think the reason kids are not committing yet is that they're waiting to see what's going to happen. Is a $250,000 offer a good offer? Is $1 million a good offer? These kids just don't know at this point, and because the finances are so up in the air. And that's why you haven't seen Duke land anybody from the class of 2026. North Carolina hasn't landed anybody. Most of the blue blood programs. I mean, a couple guys there was a kid who committed to Arkansas, a kid who committed to Missouri, but for the most part, kids have not made their choices yet. Part of it is they want to take their visits. They've been doing the Peach Jam and things like that. They've been playing in tournaments, so they, haven't been making up their mind. But I don't think you're going to see anybody making up their mind for a little while, because they are so concerned about figuring out how the money is going to be allocated. I don't blame them. There's nothing wrong with this, but this is just the reality right now of high school recruiting, I should say. It is the wild, wild west, and no one knows how many bullets they've got in their guns.
Well, speaking of the changing climate that is NIL, Jason, I have to report, because something just happened in the last 20 minutes. The president has signed an executive order that has prohibited third-party pay-for-play payments to college athletes, a move the White House is taking to curb bidding wars that have, quote, roiled college sports in recent years, this according to NBC News. So, ladies and gentlemen, everything that we just said has once again been thrown into a lurch because of this. Because this, if the collectives are kind of back out of the game, that really changes the element of NIL in this country.
I mean, Donald, there's a piece of me that's like, hey, folks, skip to this point in the podcast. But I actually think there was some.
We didn't play this either, I should say. We've been recording for the last hour, and then I was like, oh, I feel like there was something that was going on in the White House, and then bam,
this has been rumored. So yeah, Nick Saban went to the White House a couple months ago.
It was a week. It was like a week ago.
Was it? I just remember
it came out like a week ago.
He met with Trump. There's been talk that this was out there, so I'm not entirely surprised to see that it happened. I think that you're going to see very, very quickly. You will see lawsuits that are going to try to block this. I'm not a constitutional expert to be able to tell you what the president can legislate with his pen and what he needs Congress or other folks to get in the way of. But I got a feeling that this one's going to invite a lot of challenges. It's a very interesting decision on his part. I don't know, when he says third party, I mean, does that mean that Nike is not allowed to sign a player while they're still in college? I'm not sure what that is a seismic change if it goes through. And we were just talking about the fact that guys are uncertain and guys don't know, and so they're not signing, to commit to schools. Well, this is going to push that process back even further while everybody figures this part of it out. It would be a huge change, and I don't really feel like executive action, especially this kind of executive action, is the answer for the NCAA. I think they need. I've said for a long time they need to just declare the players as employees and go ahead and reach a collective bargaining agreement. That's the cleanest way to do all this stuff. I don't think that congressional action, or executive action is going to be the answer, because there's just going to be too many lawsuits.
Yeah, and again, we don't get political on this show when it comes to stuff like this, but this is something that affects what we're talking about, so we have to discuss it. And I think the one thing, Jason, that it also kind of throws into a lurch is I feel like the clearinghouse was going to move towards a point where you and I talked about this in the survey results. What a lot of people have been looking for is contract transparency, the ability to say, yes, we've signed this player for 2 years and $2 million or whatever that is, just like we have in all of professional sports where we kind of know, hey, this guy is under contract for 3 years for X amount of money and he can opt out after year two. Those sort of things, I think, is what the clearinghouse was angling to kind of get the first of all, get the contracts going, and then all of a sudden saying, hey, let's have this marketplace where we say, okay, yes, Duke has 12 guys under contract right now. Here's how this looks. And again, that would tie into a lot of what has been boiling about some of these players and the decision that they're making. We saw so many guys in this high school class wait until April, wait until late April before they made their decision because they want to see how the transfer portal fared out and where guys ended up. I think if you have these contracts, it's the same thing like we see in free agency. Oh, who's going to make the move for, Giannis Antetokounmpo? We know who has the cap space. We know who has guys at his position. We know, how many years they have left on the contracts. Those sort of things do help people when they make their decisions and they're able to make those informed decisions early. And I think with this new executive order, that throws that part into disarray as well, because now we have to focus on, as you said, the lawsuits, which were still coming. Let's be real. This wasn't going to be the end of it. It was just going to help settle a portion of it. But I do think that's going to once again throw name, image, and likeness and the paying of college players into more disarray as we get clarification on what that means. Jason, I mentioned NIL collectives, you mentioned Nike. They both could be a part of this third party thing.
Well, actually, hold on. I while you were talking, I got to look and find a little bit of clarification. It only applies to these pay for play NIL deals, that legitimate endorsements would, the kind of thing that Nike does, the kind of thing that, when player signs a deal with Chick-fil-A or something like, or Bojangles, we saw some of those. I still don't understand how Jeremy Roach didn't sign a big deal with an extermination company. Those kind of things
really messed up.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of things will still be allowed. But it's the direct pay for play NIL deals that Trump has outlawed. By the way, that it also, the executive order makes sure that women's programs, non-revenue sports, will be protected and will get to share in some of this revenue sharing kind of stuff. And it directly states, Donald, I said, I want the players to be declared employees. It says, athletes in college are not employees. They are students and they are amateurs. That's what Donald Trump has signed. We'll see.
That creates more confusion because when you say they are amateurs, amateurs do not get paid. And I think, again, this brings this whole discussion back up to the forefront again. And I'm sure, again, I'm not even going to talk about the political aspect thing. I want to talk about this, though.
I think the amateur thing is, it has to do with employment. That
it doesn't. It doesn't, because when you say amateur in that sense, I'll just say he knows what he's doing when he says that. I go back to the NCAA. If they had been adults 5 years ago when this was coming to the forefront, we wouldn't have this discussion today because it would all be codified. And the fact that it isn't means that it still is the Wild West. And when the Wild West, things can change literally with the wind. Literally, as you and I are recording, things can change. And I think that is the important part here is this does not answer any questions. It creates a million new ones. And what people don't want are more questions. They want the answers to the questions they already have so that this can kind of become a system that works and that's sustainable. Right now, it has become unsustainable. With this new route, with this new executive order, some parts of this are in an unsustainable point, and you have to address it now. Otherwise, like you said, these recruits are just going to wait, and that means these players are going to wait. That means these teams have to wait, and everything. We don't want, as bad as it is, throughout the year with recruiting and how these guys don't get a break. The last thing we want is for it to be a zoo in April or during March for those teams that don't make the NCAA tournament, that they're starting to recruit while other teams are playing the NCAA tournament. That's what the NCAA doesn't want. But again, if they had addressed it properly, this is kind of the bed that they made. So, Jason, last word to you, because we could go on about this forever.
One of my favorite movie lines of all time in a film called No Country for Old Men. Tommy Lee Jones pulls up to a crime scene. There are multiple dead bodies all over the place. And one of his deputies, and I may butcher the line, I apologize in advance. I'm going off the top of my head. One of his deputies says something like, well, this looks like a mess. And Tommy Lee Jones says, it'll do until the mess gets here. That's how I feel about college basketball NIL right now. It is a mess. It'll do until the real mess gets here. And I have no idea what the real mess is going to look like. But, man, change is a-coming.
So we're going to leave it there. Obviously, we're going to have way more to talk about as this kind of unfolds over the next few days. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, pending any other news that comes down the pike, we're going to talk about ACC news, some rule changes that are coming, and some football valuations. Wait till you get a load of how much money some of these programs are worth. Stick around and find out. Summer is here. More sun, way more heat, more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing all summer? Spending hours cooking. That's where Factor can help. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and delicious meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well.
Boy, that's right, Donald. Not only are they quick to heat up, you have a lot of options. You're not stuck with the same leftovers for the entire week. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your goals. And if you're someone who does meal prep for the week, Factor's variety of options means you can have something different every single day, and you don't have to cook. Now you can get outside and enjoy some time with your loved ones.
So get started at factormeals.com/DukeBB50 off. Use that code DukeBB50 off to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Again, that's factormeals.com/DukeBB50 off for 50% off, plus free shipping. Once again, factormeals.com/DukeBB50 off.
My name is Happy Gilmore. I haven't swung a club in years.
You know what you gotta do.
Grip it and rip it.
Or... Oh! Now that is some Happy Gilmore! Everyone is talking about the comeback kid, Happy Gilmore.
Happy Knee!
Yeah, baby!
Happy Gilmore 2, only on Netflix July 25th. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
The McDonald's Snack Wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch Snack Wrap. Spicy Snack Wrap. You broke the internet for a snack. Snack Wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there's one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
All right, we are back. Jason and I have collected our breath over the news that dropped while we were recording. I promise you the next topic that we have came down a couple days ago, so nothing has changed about this, nor will it change in the next 5 minutes. But the ACC had their media day for football a couple days ago, and within that, they had some meetings and they announced a couple of rules that don't feel like they're big rules, but they are things that can, change how we view ACC football and even basketball as well. The first thing is we will have injury reports. Now you're thinking, Donald, what do you mean by injury reports? Well, in other sports and professional leagues, you kind of get that availability report. Think of the NFL where you see who's questionable, who's probable, or who's out due to injury. The ACC is going to start providing those. They call them availability reports. They're going to start providing those to teams and to the public a few days before each game day. And I think, first of all, I think this is something that's a long time coming. Jason, this helps us, you and I, because we won't have to know if this player is going to play, if he's not. I'm sure some teams are like, hey, we want to keep those things secret because we want to be able to, spring a player who might be quote unquote injured on another team and make it where it affects their game prep. But this is good. But I think the reason why they're doing this is to get ahead of some of the gamblers who like to thrive on this
gaming
sort of thing.
Yeah.
It is definitely a gaming thing. Now, the other thing that they have come about, and this is an interesting development, is that they are going to start fining people, or fining schools, I should say, for storming the court or storming the field after a victory. Now, in the SEC, they have this thing set up. They've had it set up for a long time, where if someone storms the court or storms the field, they have to pay a fine. And the fine increases with each occurrence. And I believe it's the same thing for the ACC. I think it's 50,000, 100,000, and 250 for the first three occurrences.
It's 50, 100, 200 for the 200 for the third. Yeah.
So, but the one thing that the SEC does is, let's say Alabama's playing Auburn. Auburn wins on a kick six. Auburn rushes the field. Auburn has to pay that fine to Alabama. In the ACC, they're not going to have it where the offending school pays the offender. I think we're going to call that the Duke portion of this rule because we would get a lot of money, I feel, if it came to that.
Yo, I got a solution. You want to really take care of this? You can have your fines. The fine comes out of your total NIL pot, and it gets added to the other school's NIL pot. You would see zero court storming then.
Well, I would welcome it. If it meant that Duke is going to get more money, I wouldn't welcome the losses, but I'm like, yo, man, if you somehow beat us, come on, storm the court against us. Write that check as you cross the threshold, and you could just hand it over to coach as you invade the court or invade the field. But I think they're paying it into a general scholarship fund for the ACC that's going to go to parts unknown. But Jason, first of all, your comments and your thoughts on the availability reports as well as the fines for court storming. I think the court storming thing is something that should have happened years ago.
Yeah, no question about it. And let me start with the court storming first. Did you happen to see ESPN did a segment on this and they have named this rule?
No, I did not see that.
ESPN is calling this the Kyle Filipowski rule. in honor of Flip being bumped into and sort of knocked around by the Wake Forest fans 2 years ago. I think it's an entirely appropriate name for the rule. That was sort of perhaps the biggest of the court storming incidents that we've seen, certainly in basketball over the past few years.
No, Jason, I also, again, the SEC has had this fine rule in place for a very long time. But you know what it hasn't done? It hasn't curtailed the number of times that teams storm the field. In fact, a lot of teams, if you think about Vanderbilt, when they had those string of upsets in football, they stormed the field each time. In fact, they took the goalpost all the way down to the Cumberland River and threw it in, right? They had this whole thing. And because you have such a seismic event, a historic event for that school, some of these schools don't mind paying that fine because they understand what it means in terms of donor dollars, what it means in terms of exposure. I think they calculated that, it was like $20 million worth of exposure for free that Vanderbilt got just by beating Alabama and having the story about the trail of the goalpost. Now, Jason, I will say that Duke is not going to be absolved from this, right? We have had a court storming and field storming in the last couple of years where we beat Clemson. I'm pretty sure back then you and I would have said, hey, it was safe. As long as you're doing it safely, go ahead, have a lot of fun. Duke, cut the check. It's worth it. So you're going to have those opportunities for that. But this is in essence, meant to kind of curtail the number of times it happens. But for us, we have to hear about it almost every single year because it usually in basketball occurs. We don't see it when Miami beats Florida State. We see it when anybody beats Duke on their home floor.
Right. Exactly. And by the way, as for the availability rule, the injury report rule, I saw someone joked that the entire North Carolina team has been listed as questionable by Bill Belichick.
Belichick, yes.
He used to do that in the NFL with the Patriots. He used to do that every time. But if a
Tom
dude
Brady
came into
Tom Brady was listed as questionable for about 12 years.
Yeah, exactly. If
Every report.
You came into the training room with a hangnail, then you were questionable for the rest of the season as far as Bill Belichick was concerned. I don't think this is a particularly meaningful change. Yeah, it may give us a tiny bit more information. You usually have a pretty good idea about a guy who is definitively out. Most programs will go ahead and tell you if a guy is out, and if he's not out, they'll usually say, "Yeah, we're unsure. He's questionable." And I don't know that you're going to see teams go well beyond something like that. So I don't think that one's a big change that matters all that much.
Again, I think it depends, right? Like in the case of Duke, right? When we had some where we weren't getting any information about whether, like for example, Tyrese Proctor, when he hurt himself, like, okay, we don't have any word on Tyrese Proctor and whether he's going to play or not. So chances are the answer is no. And then magically he stepped foot on the court for that final game in Cameron. So you have those instances, and again, it's few and far between. And I'm not disparaging the coaching staff for doing that. I understand why that happens, but this gives it a more polished reference point so that you and I and even coaches can look and say, this guy is listed as questionable. UNC has listed 57 guys on their questionable roster, but one guy's out. And so you kind of have that where you can kind of look at it. And I think, and that doesn't mean that if a player is not listed on the injury report that he can't get injured between that time and the start of the game. That also happens too. But I think it gives a little bit more of a reference point. And I think that's what, again, to combat some of the gaming that can happen, I think that's what the ACC was going for.
Yeah, look, I'm glad to see the conference at least taking a sensible stance on the court storming. Frankly, these things should have been in place a while ago.
Yeah, and will we beat some team that's ranked in the top 10, like Illinois or something? You know what, Duke, just cut the check. Just let us know ahead of time that that's what you want to do. Maybe we can chip in a few bucks here and there in the donors, but we can make it happen.
I've got no problem, by the way, with court storming or field storming, provided it is done in a safe way and provided it is done in a way that allows the team that lost to safely and easily get out of the way. The problem is when folks go running willy-nilly and they run into Kyle Filipowski and stuff like that. I was at the Clemson game this past year, and I was seated right behind the Duke bench. And when it became clear that Clemson might win, you saw a few more cops trickling around. When it became clear at the very end that Clemson was going to win, they did a really good job. I talked about this on the podcast. They did a good job of walling the students off from the Duke players and the Duke bench and getting those guys out of there. I'm not saying it was a completely safe situation. I'm not saying that Clemson deserves a ton of praise or anything like that. But I think they at least tried to make sure that it was a situation that was not harmful potentially to Duke. And, I'll give them some credit for that. There were some dicey moments in it, but at least they tried.
I think, and again, we're maybe getting to the weeds a little bit, but I know we discussed this back then when Kyle Filipowski, that happened to them, the Clemson game you mentioned. And I think for me, either you have, it's funny, football has a better chance of curtailing or at least, corralling people into a particular end zone because there's more space, even though there's more people at football games than there is in basketball, where basketball is a 94 by 50 court. There's not a lot of places for people to go. And so when people go onto the court, it happens very quickly and there's an opportunity there for things bad to happen. I think if you have a running clock, I think there was people who said, start to, when the game is over, when it hits 000, nobody comes on the court for 60 seconds, let everybody do their handshakes, and then the team can get out of there. And then you can go. If it's one thing before, then you play the next game without fans. Like that sort of thing where it would stop and also make it where the students really, because the students are the ones that that really lead that. And again, it's fun for them. It's fun when you're the team that's storming the court. It's fun to celebrate that win in the way you do, but you got to do it safely. And I think this is a first step, not the grandest step, but it's the first step towards making that a little bit safer for everyone. Jason, before we get out of here, there's something that I know you want to discuss and something that was in the Athletic, I want to say, over the last week. Football valuations. What would happen if you treated the University of Texas, University of Alabama, Duke University's football team as a professional team? We saw that the LA Lakers got sold for close to $10 billion. But what about these teams? What would they be worth? Jason, I hand it to you because I know you got the answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, this is a really interesting process by the Athletic, and what they did was they looked at the revenue that these teams have reported over the past several years. They looked a little bit at what is their potential future. Do they look like a program that is on the move, is going places, versus a program that maybe is stagnating. Again, from a revenue standpoint, and then they looked at transactions in other sports to try and come up with a valuation that made sense. They said for, teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, they were looking at like NFL and NBA transactions. And for teams from the ACC and the Big 12, they were looking at like Major League Baseball and NHL transactions, because frankly, the NBA and the NFL are the big boys of pro sports right now in terms of what their franchises are worth, the same way the SEC and the Big Ten are the big boys in college basketball and college sports and so on. So that's not as interesting as actually they had a great line, by the way. He said it meant the Athletic said this means that we're treating Notre Dame like the Los Angeles Lakers and treating Boston College like the Kansas City Royals, which I thought was just absolutely hysterical. Poor BC. In any event, so they came up with valuations based on revenues and things like that. And let's be clear, by the way, college teams are not making anywhere close to the amount of money that pro teams are. It's not even in the same ballpark. So the number one, the most valuable of every football team in the country is the Texas Longhorns, who had revenue last year of $183 million. Sorry, not last year, over the past 3 years. Revenue of over $183 million. And the Athletic says that means that they are worth almost $2.4 billion.
Now, I would say that $180 million, that's not spread over 3 years. I believe that's the average.
Right. That's the average. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
they're making way more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I implied otherwise. Yeah. And in fact, my understanding is that's really brought down by like 3 years ago. That in the past 2 years, Texas has been either close to or above $200 million in football revenue. Wow. So yeah, the multiple gets them up to about 2.4 almost $billion. Georgia is second at 1.9 billion. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, very predictable names there at the top. All these are programs that are worth over $1.8 billion. Donald, can you guess who the first ACC program is on the list?
I would think it's North Carolina. Or I'm sorry, let me take that back. I think it's Clemson.
Florida State.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, Florida State comes in. They're like in the mid to late teens. Maybe it's as low as 20. They're worth $867 million. And it was very interesting. They said that the recent settlement that Florida State had with the ACC, regarding like exit fees and so like Florida State was sort of suing to get out of the ACC. They reached a settlement that sort of that put a cap on that process and said basically nothing's going to happen until 2030. But the fact that it looks like there's a very great potential for an exit from the ACC in 2030. You and I haven't talked about this that much on the show. Mm-hmm. All the experts are saying that the ACC is going to come apart in 2030. By the way,
yeah, we're just we're riding the wave while we can. Yeah,
exactly. 5 years down the road, we'll deal with that then. But anyway, they said that because it looks like the ACC has sort of given FSU a path to exit in 2030, that helps their valuation, and the perception is that they have a bright future. You can probably guess the second most valuable team is Clemson, $665 million they're worth. Who comes in at number 3?
Would that be us?
No. This is football, baby.
Oh, the UNC. I'd say UNC.
Actually, it's your Miami Hurricanes.
Okay, yeah, that's one of those two.
Yeah, exactly. Miami comes in just over $600 million, and then North Carolina, UNC comes in fourth at $572 million. And it's very interesting. They said that North Carolina is up here not because of Bill Belichick, because, people don't necessarily see how long his future is there. They said North Carolina they think is valuable because North Carolina, the state, is a fast-growing state. Apparently only Florida and Texas are growing faster than the state of North Carolina in terms of population right now. And they think, these experts think that means that UNC has a lot of potential to grow into the future. All right. We've gotten past the easy ones. The next batch of ACC schools: Virginia Tech, NC State, Louisville, Georgia Tech. We're now down to schools that are only worth about $350 million. Syracuse is the 9th most valuable ACC program. And finally, at number 10, your Duke Blue Devils, the 10th most valuable ACC football program, $323 million. The interesting thing is Duke's football revenues are actually better than a lot of the teams that it's grouped around, a lot of the teams that it's near. Like Duke made almost $65 million from football. That's much more than Louisville and Georgia Tech and Syracuse. It's the same ballpark as Virginia Tech and NC State, who are both worth $450+ million. So why is Duke only worth $320 million? It is because football is perceived as a clear second-tier program at Duke to the basketball program. And they said because Duke is seen as a school that will always be a basketball-first program, they have marked down the value of the football team. I think that is unfair. I also think that happens to be very true.
Yeah, I was about to say the truth hurts sometimes, and that is some hurtful truth. But I also think, what this doesn't take into account is the amount of investment that we've seen in the football realm over the last decade, right? From the expansion of the Yo Center, the building of the practice facility, the renovations of Brooks, Wallace Wade Stadium, Brooks Field, all that. The coaching investments that we've had, again, NIL investments, the collective that's been created for football. So obviously it's easy to start from nothing and build your way up, but build up we have. And I think that helps. And again, you've seen in some of the talent that we are able to recruit because of the fact that we're not we're at least on the football side, we're not settling for being a second tier program. We're trying to compete to get to that ACC championship game, which would then, if we win it, gets us into the playoff. And so I think that has opened up a lot of doors. And I think, again, the ability of this athletic department led by Nina King to really balance all these finances and make it where all these programs, not just football, not just basketball, but some of these other non-revenue sports, making them the priorities that they need to be to compete in the ACC and be a well-rounded university when it comes to athletics. I think that would eventually help the thing go. So I feel that's a little unfair to think of it that way. But when you think about the investment, I'm proud of where we're at.
Yeah. And while I would love to say, Duke should be rated way higher than 10th in the conference in terms of where the football team is valuable, I think we have such a long history of being thought of as a football doormat. It really hasn't been true for like a decade now, but history was there. And it's just going to take a little time to knock that perception away. But Mike Elko and Coach Cutt and now our current coaching staff is doing a heck of a job of making sure that that's going to happen. And I think that, Manny Diaz has Duke headed in the right. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, Donald. We don't have time. I don't want to get into it. But Football Media Day happened today, and Manny Diaz, Darian Mensah, our new quarterback. There are a lot of people who say some big things are headed for Durham this fall before the basketball season even gets started.
And they have a nice, decent non-conference schedule that can hopefully open up more eyeballs and say, hey, this Duke team is pretty good. But Jason, I will also say this. I'll end with this on the college football perspective. Everything in college football is cyclical. Everything. Now I know the NIL has kind of thrown that cycle into a little bit of a elongated time structure. But Jason, when I was in school, we were the doormat, but you know who else was? Clemson. Clemson was the doormat, right? 20 years ago, the SEC was not winning everything. It was the Big Ten. It was the Pac-12. and it was the evolving Big 12. And the SEC, Alabama was 5-6, and you had Auburn, who wasn't that good. They had a couple of years of greatness. It took Nick Saban to really get Alabama back on the path they are today. It took, Kirby Smart to get Georgia on the path that they are today. It took some moments where they looked at themselves and said, "Yo, we need to make a move, and we need to make it now." The class of the SEC for a long time was LSU, and again, LSU is not as prominent as some of the SEC programs today. So everything's cyclical.
Was LSU and Florida.
Yeah, Florida was winning national championships, but they were the only team really that was competing with themselves. We've seen the stories about what they were doing to kind of elevate their game, because they knew, just like us, they were in a position where they were the Duke of the SEC, right? Last year we just had to figure out a way to compete with ourselves. That's what they were doing for the better part of a decade, because the SEC wasn't that great. Now that cycle is going to change in some fashion. We just don't know how it's going to change. But I think what we agree on is that the way that Duke is positioning itself, it wants to be a part of that next cycle of greatness. And we're positioning ourselves to kind of make that move when the time is right. And hopefully it starts this year with Darian Mensah and Manny Diaz. That will do it for this episode of DBR Bites. Again, we're going to have news as it comes in. We're going to react to it, but keep it locked on us. DBR Podcast.
So much content, Donald. We gave the folks a lot of content today.
Yes, and you'll get over the next couple days so you can enjoy your weekend. But if you have questions, if you have comments, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. And maybe, Jason, we need to figure out a way to dig into the mailbox and see if there's something that we can talk about next week, provided there's no news that drops in the middle of the weekend. But until then, he's Jason. I'm Donald. The sound you hear is the Duke Band. They're going to play us out and take us home.
Man, I wish folks could have seen my face when you read that news, because you were like, "Oh, we've got some NIL news." I was like, "Oh, I wonder what it'll be." And it's funny, as you were reading it, I was completely shocked, but then I kind of went, "Wait, Trump's been talking about doing this for a while."
But again, I was like,
sort of knew it.
I was thinking like, "Oh yeah, didn't he mention like he was thinking about doing it, but we never actually got it?" He kind of said it in the thing, and I was looking up what he had said a week ago, and that was the first news article that came up, and I was like, "Well, so shit, funny. Sheriff." Yeah. Well, let's talk about this. Let's just throw it in the log of the fire.